We've all been annoyed by ads, every one of us. And we've also all clicked on ads. Now, some of those were by accident because the page was deceptively designed. But at worst, an ad should do no harm, right? Be off on the side, not distract me too much. We work hard on Data Skeptic to make our ads relatively well targeted, to vet the vendors and everything else. I'd like to say we have good ads. I certainly don't let anyone advertise on here who wants to scam you, but I can't say that about the rest of the internet. There are good ads and there are bad ads, but what does it mean to be a bad ad? Again, we've all got opinions, but I prefer something empirical and concrete. That's why I was happy to come across the paper, What Makes a Bad Ad? User Perceptions of Problematic Online Advertising. Eric Zeng joins us today to go through the findings.
My name is Eric Zeng. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Carnegie Mellon University, where I work in the Scilab Security and Privacy Institute.
What kind of things go on at that institute?
I don't know. I actually just started, but it is a whole variety of different research into security and privacy. We've done stuff on Internet of Things, online advertising. Yeah, just a huge variety of stuff that I'm still getting ramped up on.
Well, what got you interested in the space of ads and privacy and things like that in general?
The first project that I did on ads was interesting because we were actually looking into misinformation online around after the 2016 elections. We were looking at some of these fake news websites that people were very concerned about. One thing that stuck out to my advisor and I were all of these basically really trashy ads that they looked like scams. They had like distasteful, disgusting, or sexualized content that just you just don't really want to see when you're just browsing the web. It was happening consistently enough on these sites that, we decided to basically spin up a research project and try to figure out what was going on here. And so that sort of led to this whole investigation of what is going on here? Why are there so many bad ads on the web that people probably don't want to see? Yeah, and so we've taken that direction and published maybe, I think, 3 papers now on this already. Yeah.
Well, this is a big question that I guess in some sense is going to fill our whole time together, but what is a bad ad?
Yes, it's an excellent question. I think it's something we've struggled to actually define. We've tried to basically define this through a bunch of our work, but basically it's an ad that somehow tries to mislead or deceive or grab your attention in a way that maybe is perhaps somehow problematic, like somehow trying to take advantage or manipulate you. This ranges from things like phishing ads, where ads are trying to imitate like a warning or an error on your computer to trick you into clicking on it. Or maybe it's like a clickbait ad where they've got some celebrity gossip. You wouldn't believe what George Lopez looks like now. Or maybe it's something like an ad for a dietary supplement where it claims, here's one easy trick to losing body fat. So all of these are just using some sort of dishonesty or deception to try to get you into clicking on it.
It seems to me there's a gray area here. Some ads are going to be illegal and some are just in poor taste or misleading. Are there firm guidelines for, saying something is just shouldn't be there versus is just kind of a bad ad?
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. And so, all these advertising companies that are out there, these platforms that let you buy ads and run them on websites like Google Ads, like Facebook, they all have content policies and they have rules against things you can and can't do. So on most of these, you can't have ads for guns. You can't have ads that spread malware. And they try to do a good job of enforcing these rules. But, this is really like a cat and mouse game or an arms race between, I guess, malicious advertisers and the advertising platforms. And so these malicious advertisers are basically looking for any kind of loopholes or basically just skirting the line, living in that gray area that you said, basically trying to find out, what can we slip by the content moderators, but still somehow, trick people or, game the system, try to get people to click on them when they might not otherwise. The fact that we see bad ads out there means that basically these rules aren't perfect and that these loopholes are being exploited. So my research basically has been looking into, trying to look at what ads are in this gray area and then seeing if we can draw that line differently.
Being I guess at one of these big advertising platforms, I'm sure they all work a little different, but they all, as you said, have some sort of content moderation policies, and there must be a person or most likely a team or a couple teams perhaps that are there to enforce or to check on those policies. I'm sure that's a hard job. I don't want to, say it's easy to do, but it's also, I guess we'll say necessary but not sufficient because we still do see lots of bad ads. Do you have a broad perspective on, are they doing the best they can do, or a lot more needs to be invested in this area? What's the general current state of the world?
It's really complicated to answer that, actually, because the advertising on the online advertising market is actually very fragmented. So there's a lot of different companies where you can buy ads from as an advertiser, and there's actually a huge network of intermediaries where the advertiser buys an ad from this company, but then they go to this ad auction where they compete with other advertisers to place their ad on the page, and then that goes to another company that is involved in actually putting the ads on websites. And so there's actually a number of intermediaries in this chain, a number of options where individual advertisers can turn to put their ads. And so each one of these layers needs to have their own content moderation. And so some of them do a better job than others. So, for example, I think Google overall has extensive policies. They have the resources to put together a strong moderation team. They have engineers and stuff to do machine learning stuff to try to identify these ads automatically. But, there are smaller advertising platforms that maybe don't have the same resources. Or maybe some of them are actually intentionally also trying to walk this line of deception. So in one of our papers, we studied what are called native ads on news websites. And so these are basically ads that are specially designed to imitate links to news articles at the bottom of the page. If you're reading a news article, you scroll to the bottom and then it'll have a link to here's another story you might want to read. And so these ads are specifically designed to look like those links to the next article. They're in cooperation with the website. They are styled to use the same fonts as the website, to have it in the format of the link to the next news sites. And often they'll be labeled with things like sponsored content or around the web, but it's not always clear that's an advertisement. The advertising platforms that basically create this type of ad or sell this type of ad are trying to be deceptive on purpose to try to get people to click on those. We found that some of these advertising platforms like Rev Content or Taboola or Outbrain, they just seem to have more of these clickbait ads and these sort of things that we would categorize as bad. All of this is to say basically that some of these ad platforms have lower standards than others.
I can't imagine any of those platforms are particularly transparent about what ads they're serving. Not that they should be. It might be nice if they had some sort of relationship with researchers like yourself, but I'm going to guess that broadly you're starting from scratch to try and get some data on these ads. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's we basically have been crawling. We've been running web crawlers to collect data on this because these companies aren't very keen to share this type of information with us. Generally, our approach is to run these web crawlers that will basically open a page and then identify all the ads on the page, save a screenshot of them so that we can analyze them later.
And could you expand on that process? I'm sure there's a few engineering feats to be achieved. What does it take to get all those ads into a place where you can do analysis on them?
The way we designed our crawler for ads is we use this browser automation library called Puppeteer. And this basically hooks into the Chrome DevTools protocol and lets you control Chrome through JavaScript. And then in our Puppeteer script, basically, we open up a web page. We then use an ad block filter list to identify which elements on the page are ads. And then once we have that list of ads, for each ad, we will take a screenshot. We will scrape the HTML content, any iframes that the ad has. And then we will send this all to our database where we will save it. And then, so we basically built up this mess. Our crawls can get fairly large, so sometimes we'll crawl hundreds of thousands or a million ads at once, well, over time, I guess. We ran a few different crawls for different studies. So in our study of news websites, we generated a list of news websites from the Alexa Web Information Service, which was, I think, shut down now. we generated a list of news websites, and then we would run a crawl on all of those news websites as well as an article from each of those pages. In that study, we also looked at misinformation websites. So we were interested in looking at the fake news websites. So we aggregated a big list of websites from fact checkers like PolitiFact and Snopes. We also ran a crawl on that list. And then we kind of extended this work in a later study on political ads. So we were interested in identifying deceptive political ads during the 2020 election. And so we ran crawls every day on this list of websites from September 2020 to January 2021. And so collected a pretty massive data set of 1.3 million ads.
Wow. And that's pretty raw data then. I think these are all screenshots. What do you do then to get some metadata or some segmentation out of it?
Yeah, so we actually tried a number of different approaches across the work that we've done. So in our first iteration of the work, it was just me looking at them. So I would just manually look at all the screenshots and then label them with various deceptive techniques or product categories that I identified through this qualitative coding process. I'd put them into categories like, this is a content farm, which is like an ad that links to like this trashy article with a bunch of ads plastered on it. And the goal is just to get a lot of views and ad revenue. Or another category, for example, is like an insurance advertorial. So this ad looks like it's an article, an editorial article, but it's actually an ad and it's trying to sell you car insurance or life insurance or whatever. The first time I did this, I basically just looked at every single ad and then put them into a category. But obviously that's not scalable. So I did that for like 5,000 ads, I think. And, that took like a solid 2 weeks of 8-hour days just plugging through the ads.
Did that have any psychological impact on you?
Oh man, it just reinforced how much I hate ads. And so online advertising, it's useful. It's important for allowing businesses to tell people that they have their products, educate people about things. But the stuff I was going through was really the bottom of the barrel. And it's it makes you really think that the industry is kind of broken in how much it's willing to tolerate here.
And when you look across those different categories of bad ads, do you have any rough breakdown, like percentage-wise, or what are the most prevalent types of bad ads that come up?
Yeah, so in the study where we asked people, which ads do you like and dislike and for what reasons? So the leading category was these clickbait ads, which were about 20% of the ads had over half the people think that they were clickbait. Basically ads that will be sensationalist. Maybe they'll hide some information from you to try to bait you into clicking on it. Another category of ads that I think people generally didn't like are just ones that people thought were ugly or poorly designed. So, used weird fonts or just, felt lazily put together. So again, for our data set of 500 ads, there were 13.6% of the ads, at least half the people said that they were ugly or poorly designed. And then for deceptive ads, so ads that were untrustworthy, attempting to mislead you, 11.2% of ads had at least half of the people labeled them as deceptive.
And are you broadly seeing a consensus amongst the raters, or are there a lot of gray areas?
The amount of consensus really depends on the label. Some reasons people disliked ads had more agreement than others. So, for example, people were more likely to have consensus on ads on categories like clickbait, but on other categories like ads being pushy or manipulative, or just ads where they just didn't like the product, there's definitely less agreement on those.
Cloud ushers in great potential. Today's data-driven organizations can innovate and fly higher and faster than before. Astrato is built for modern data teams. It's a cloud-native solution with direct access to all the power, agility, and scalability of the Snowflake Data Cloud. And with Astrato, there's no data movement, so your business reaps the benefits of enhanced data quality, boosting your competitive advantage, reducing costs, and improving decision-making business-wide. Because your insights are always up to date, Astrato is extremely useful as a rapid prototyping tool, further speeding up the time to value. Data teams can employ this time-saving capability for data prototyping, rapid dashboards, and building business application prototypes so you can test things in a rich, no-code environment. This means the time to value is reduced from hours or days to mere minutes. As a progressive data leader, you need the right resources to help your team and help performance levels soar. Find out more at astrato.io/dataskeptic. ASTRATO, astrato.io/dataskeptic. Thanks to our sponsor, ClearML. ClearML is an open-source MLOps solution users love to customize. It helps you easily track, orchestrate, and automate ML workflows at scale. Machine learning is no fad. Your organization is only going deeper on investment. Don't let this be a source of technical debt. ClearML can improve every step in your ML workflow, making it a tool loved by data engineers, ML engineers, DevOps people, and data scientists alike. ClearML is hands down the best collaborative ML tool with full visibility and extensibility. As a contributor on a machine learning team, ClearML amplifies your efforts. As a manager, ClearML gives you the transparency and metrics to guide your team's efforts effectively when you can't get pulled into the weeds. Their solution logs your entire process. Your data and models are versioned, so there's no questions of provenance or audits that can't be done. Model repositories give you a clear view of available binaries, and you can deploy pipelines directly from code. Supercharge your entire development process. Go check out ClearML today. Visit clear.ml to get started. And I know in the survey responses you got, at least in some of the studies, there were qualitative things like a Likert scale, what's your overall opinion about it, but as well there was some free response data, which is super rich and interesting and how robust. I can type whatever I want, but then gives you a challenge as the researcher to what to do with this free text. Could you talk a little bit about that process?
For this study where we were having people label what they liked or disliked about ads, the first thing we had to do is we had to come up with like what these labels were. Like, so where did we come up with? We need to come up with like the labels like deceptive or distasteful or boring. These are some of the ones we used for that survey. We had to come up with these labels somehow rather than sort of us deciding what those would be. The first step was we conducted this sort of pre-survey where we just showed people some ads and then we asked them to just write down what they liked and what they didn't like about it. And so, like you said, this means that we have like a bunch of written text that's totally unstructured. We did this qualitative coding process. And so basically what we did is we read through all the responses. We generated a list of codes that we thought, summarized basically what the people said. Someone might say like, I don't really need electric razors. Or people might say like, I don't have any kids, so I don't need these diapers. We might code those all as being irrelevant. So this ad wasn't relevant. And so basically we came up with a bunch of possible labels to try to summarize those things. We condensed that into a code book of around a dozen different reasons for why people might like or dislike an ad. We came up with a list of a dozen codes that would describe basically all the different types of responses that people had.
This hasn't happened to me, but it wouldn't surprise me to see some ad for making a medical claim that was scientifically baseless, take this sugar pill and it'll cure your cancer or something like that. I feel like if I wanted to be the activist to take that on, it would be a full-time job just to figure out all the parties involved and to report it and where do I report it. Is that the case, or is there good mechanisms for people to flag and get things taken down?
I think there's some organizations out there that kind of work in that space called, there's one called, I think, Truth in Advertising that has taken on a lot of deceptive advertising. But I think for the regular person, I'm not sure how many channels there are. So some ad platforms like Google will let you report the ad directly. Like if you think it's somehow a scam or something, if you can find the little tiny X icon on the ad, you can click that and then report it to them. But not all ad platforms let you do this. I think the other way you can go about it as a regular person is you could report it to the FTC, especially if you have been scammed by it and you've lost money. They're very interested to know if this has happened to you. I think you have to get lawyers involved and they have to basically provide evidence that these ads are deceptive and harming consumers in some way. And that might be hard to do, especially with like low-grade clickbait like content farms, which it's just like a crappy article about celebrity gossip. That might be hard to prove to the FTC. But some of the more severe stuff could fall under that type of regulation.
When you look through the different labels and the categories you came up with, are there some types of bad ads that people seem more offended with than others?
I think the ads that people dislike the most are the ones that they thought were likely to be scams. And so these generally fell into like the health and supplements category or the software downloads, the malware category. So like we've been talking about before, the ads that are saying like one simple hack to keep your blood sugar below 100 or one cup of this helps rapid fat loss. I think people pretty well attuned to that being potentially a scam. And so that's sort of like at the bottom of their list. And similarly, the ads that want you to download software and look a bit sketchy, like ads that imitate like this. We saw this ad that looks like a driver update. It says like free driver update, update your drivers in less than 2 minutes, update now, fast and free. And so I think that stuff just, it's been around long enough that people just, people know that that's likely to be a scam. And yeah.
So I'm looking through the opinion labels from the surveys, things like, as we've said, clickbait or good design, ugly, bad design. Some of the things like boring or irrelevant, that's not a good ad, but that's not the worst type of ad out there, right? Which ones of these categories are you really most concerned with?
Yeah, I'm most concerned with ads where it's somehow misleading people and potentially causing them harm, either by causing them to lose money, causing them to waste their time, things like that. And so that's really like the ads that are clickbait or deceptive or distasteful. So ads that are like, they have like gross pictures of body parts or stuff, things that just like, actively are making people's experience using the web worse. Basically anything that would cause people to basically just pick up and close the tab because it's so bad or things like that. Yeah, like inevitably, some advertisers will just not do a good job targeting people, or they'll just make something that's not that visually appealing. So we can't really fix that, and that's probably fine. But yeah, just the things that are like actively, making people's experience worse, I think, are the ones that are of the most concern.
Yeah, deceptive is especially concerning, and I was surprised, if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like more than half of your participants agreed that about 11% of the ads they looked at were deceptive. So more than 1 in 10 ads, which seems sort of alarmingly frequent.
Yeah, it is somewhat high. I'm not sure if that's like true across like all ads everyone ever sees. It is just a sample of the ads that we crawled from news websites on the web. So this doesn't include like Facebook ads, YouTube ads, TikTok ads, things like that. So it's not like a perfect estimate, but at least like, on the web where you just have banner ads, it can be like a bad place depending on which websites you're on.
And of course, people can always explore installing some type of ad blocker. I think you mentioned you'd had one. I use one on one computer and not another just so I can see the differences. Do you see any correlation amongst your study participants related to, their choice to use an ad blocker or not?
What we ended up seeing is that people who used ad blockers were more inclined to dislike the ads that they saw versus the people that did not use ad blockers. So I think, people who are strongly opinionated against ads already are also probably using ad blockers right now.
Yeah, it seems like a natural result. Although I kind of wonder, like, as a publisher, if I continue to pollute the internet with low-quality ads, or I let low-quality ads on my site, am I going to just reduce the amount of people who are going to see them? Because the more low-quality ads there are, the more likely people are to try and get an ad blocker going. I don't know that anyone really thinks that way, because obviously no one controls the whole internet, but are there any lessons for publishers, perhaps, on how to keep their content in a better place and make consumers more likely to come back and look at it again?
I think it's generally true that, the worse your ad experience is on your webpage, the more people you're going to turn away, the more people who are going to use ad blockers to try to access your page. I guess the part that doesn't give me as much hope that this will lead them to change their behavior is that first, they depend on these ads for revenue, and so sometimes the publishers will put ad blocker blockers on that prevent you from reading the page if you have the ad blockers on. And I think we saw this in our data is that, it's generally the younger, more tech-savvy people who are turning to ad blockers, who know how to install them. If the intended audience of the website is people who are less tech-savvy, perhaps older, if that's their primary audience, then maybe they don't need to care about like the small fraction of people who are younger and using more ad blockers. So I'm not entirely sure that they're going to learn their lesson, but I think the observation is correct in general that like they have to ride this line between putting up more ads versus like losing people due to like how much it degrades their experience.
Well, one of the types of ads, I'm looking now kind of at the clustering results specifically, and I'm seeing a couple I actually have seen on the internet. One being this, yes or no is the media fair, and there's a picture of Trump and a yes or no as if I'm about to vote in a poll. But of course, it's pretty obvious. I click on that, that link goes to a site. Those buttons don't work, although maybe I'll take a survey there. But I'm pretty suspicious of that one myself. My instinct says that that's not really a survey, but a political ad of some kind. Do you know? Did you happen to click on that one or know what's behind it?
Yeah, we actually ran in our subsequent study that we did on political ads in the 2020 election, we saw a lot of these ads using this same strategy. There's many of these ads that look like polls, and they'll have something pretty inflammatory. We saw an ad that says like, should illegal immigrants get unemployment benefits? Yes or no? And so I think like the goal here is to get people to click on them to like basically signal what their political beliefs are. And so whether that involves Trump or some policy issue. And so when you click on these ads, it leads you to a website where you can pick that yes or no option, but then to proceed, you also need to provide your email address. What we think is going on here is that not that they're actually collecting a legitimate like opinion poll. These are often like political organizations, like instead trying to collect your email addresses so that you can get added to a mailing list. And then in that mailing list, then they'll spam you with campaign ads. We looked this up in a database that Princeton collected on political ads or political emails, but some of them will send ads inside these emails, like very similar to like these clickbait ads, like ads for like dietary supplements or ads for weird gadgets or things like that. You know, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, but like they might also be selling your email address to other political campaigns, to other marketers, things like that. So it's a pretty elaborate and deceptive type of political ad.
So once you've got all the survey results and all these ads crawled and kind of coded up, you now have a nice data set, but something else has to be done to really analyze it and gain some insights. Can you talk a little bit about the clustering approach, why you chose it, and what you learned from it?
Yeah, so this was a really interesting problem we had to deal with. So, you know, for every ad that we had people look at, we had 10 people rate what they liked and disliked. So across over a dozen different categories. So like, it's simple, it's boring, it looks good, I don't like the product. Basically, what we had for each ad is this categorical distribution of these labels. You know, 10% clickbait, 30% dislike product, 50% simple, for example. Because we don't have full agreement and because there are multiple labels involved, we can't just say like, oh, let's just look at all the ads that are labeled clickbait. There's just too much data going on here across multiple levels of categories. The approach we ended up finding to cluster these is called population label distribution learning. What this approach is, it's an unsupervised learning approach where you basically cluster your data items that have similar distributions together. So, for example, if there are two ads that have similar percentages of clickbait labels and similar percentages of, for example, unclear as a label. So basically, if the shape of all of those labels across the distribution are similar to another ad, they'll get clustered together. And so what this means in practice is it's clustering the ads. The population of people who labeled the ad together feel the same way about the ad. This means, so let's say there's like a clickbait ad that some people also find funny. So there's maybe some even disagreement in the population. So those ads will get like put together, and those will be separate from the ads where people think it's clickbait and nobody finds it funny. So basically it'll like put together these ads where like there's similar conjunctions of labels with a similar like percentage of people. It was a very nifty way to sort of like condense this really complicated data set with lots of disagreements into something that was much more coherent.
I know you may not have full transparency into what the various platforms' content policies are or how they're executed, But do you have a rough sense, given, all of this analysis, how many things are getting through that violate the policy? What percentage of bad ads are out there?
Based on what I've looked at, I'd still say, it's a small percentage, maybe 10, 15% of ads out there that are below the standard, which I think should be allowed. I think it's not a huge problem in that it's not sinking the whole advertising industry. You notice it a lot when you go to specific websites where these ads seem targeted. Like, if I tried to download... I remember I tried to download this program. It's called paint.net. It's like this free Photoshop alternative for Windows.
Yeah.
And all of the ads on that page were for sketchy downloads that probably were some kind of adware or malware. It seems very highly targeted at that. And again, just on news sites, you scroll to the bottom of the page and it's filled with that really awful clickbait. And I think so, just even though maybe as a whole, it might be 10% of the ads out there, I think you get to a specific place and you just get bombarded with these really misleading ads. And so I think that's a problem. And they really could be doing more to identify these edge cases and stamp out the problem ads there.
Phishing and malware and misleading things, especially when it comes to health, are all categories that I find, very troublesome and would like to see less often or taken down. Do you have any advice for the content policy teams? Is this something that maybe they need more manual intervention or more machine learning? What are the right steps you would recommend?
Yeah, so I think one thing I would recommend is that they sort of take our user-centric approach to studying this problem and really see what people are concerned about, whether it's through surveys, whether it's through better tools to let people report bad ads, and basically incorporate users' voices into their content moderation pipeline. I don't know to what extent right now, they have a finger on the pulse of what is bothering people on the web today. Making it easier to get people involved in that would be one way to do it. And the other area of concern I really hope they take more seriously is these political ads. I think there has been scrutiny of how they handle political ads, and they definitely scrutinize ads from official political campaigns more heavily these days. But there's all sorts of political ads that are not from a candidate's campaign, like ads for political products or ads from unregistered political organizations that are running deceptive ads, running misinformation that are just not caught by their criteria. So I think that's another area they should focus on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the prominent stories in political ads is the Russian interference in the election, which I think certainly happened. I haven't looked deep into it. I guess the open question is, how effective were their efforts? Would you wager a guess at that?
The efforts of the Russians or the ad platforms?
Well, even broadly speaking, any political interference, even though the Russian political interference is the one that makes the best headline. Were they just giving a lot of money to Facebook to have ads shown, or do you think that an impact was made?
Yeah, that's so hard to answer. I would be totally guessing, but I think, that election was so close that I think any marginal change could have impacted it. So it's, maybe could have swung a few people into deciding, oh, things are so bad, I shouldn't vote at all. The real thing is it feels like it just contributes to this whole atmosphere of political polarization. Yeah, I just think it's bad to allow anyone and everyone to just leap into that by sending advertising to people and just amplifying that kind of misinformation through paid media. Yeah.
As you'd mentioned, there's a lot of intermediaries in the process, from the person who creates the ad. Maybe there's a couple of agencies that help them interface with the ad platforms, and then, of course, the platform themselves. So it's easy to kind of distribute the blame around. Is everyone accountable, or should we really focus more on the platforms?
Yeah, so in the process of sending an ad, it's going through multiple intermediaries, and each of them might have some involvement in content moderation, have their own policies, have their own teams reviewing it. Some of them may have higher standards for bad ads than others. Some of them might shift responsibility for moderating ads to others. So it's not like there's basically it's not just Google that exists. And it's an advertiser goes to Google and then Google does stuff and then the ad goes to the website. So there's just a few people along that chain. I don't know exactly what the policy solution is here, but you want to get all of these companies basically aligned in terms of where their standards are at. there could be regulations, at the FTC level just against deception in general that then they hold these particular ad platforms accountable. There could also be basically some kind of transparency mechanism, so making it easier for researchers to see, what's the chain of responsibility here, and then basically from the outside audit and identify which of the ad platforms is responsible. Yeah, those are maybe two possible ways around it. But basically, I feel like almost a broken record, but just calling for more transparency from these ad tech companies just so that the public can really see what's going on there.
When you think about the future, what sorts of changes or ways in which the ad ecosystem could evolve, what would you like to see happening?
I guess one thing I'm excited about for the future is just the use of machine learning in general to improve moderation of these ads. So I think what we've seen in the natural language processing space in the past just 3-4 years alone is that the ability for large language models to interpret text, classify it to really high accuracies, has just improved so much from before. Advertising platforms could really take advantage of these tools to do much better automated content moderation of deceptive and misleading ads. I think that's one thing I'm hoping to look at myself, but also I'm hoping that the industry also adopts. Just in general, stronger efforts from regulators just to adapt to the new forms of deception in online advertising. So through maybe a combination of new legislation, perhaps related to privacy and stuff, just building in more authority and tools for them to be able to regulate and adapt to new forms of deception in advertising. And I think this will be especially important, just as we see things like augmented reality, virtual reality, metaverse, things like that. There's going to be new ways for people to new ways for bad actors to take advantage of those systems and take advantage of ads in those systems to potentially cause harm to people. So yeah, I'm just hoping that the government response to that will be able to keep up.
And where can listeners follow you online?
Yeah, you can find me online at ericwzeng.com. There I have links to all of my project pages and papers.
Awesome. We'll have links in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Had a lot of fun today.
Thanks for listening to another installment of Data Skeptic Ad Tech. Next week, we explore the YouTube conspiracy video rabbit hole, and more specifically, the ads that those viewers see. This will get us deeper into that question of just how much impact can these ads have.
I mean, the difference is pretty monumental. Overall, conspiracy videos had an almost 11 times higher prevalence of likely predatory or deceptive ads, and when you break that down by category, some of the differences are even more stark.
See you next week, everybody.